Welcome. This is Jean Eaton of Information Managers, your practical privacy coach. Today we're going to talk about the Health Information Act and Information Manager Agreements. When you are working in a group practice, you want to have a clear understanding about how all the players are going to contribute to the patient records and how they're going to get that information out when the health service providers leave the practice. A group practice for physicians is considered a healthcare practice. Physicians under the Health Information Act provide health services and are individuals designated under the Regulated Health Professions Act. Other custodians in the Health Information Act includes pharmacists, chiropractors, dentists, dental mechanics, dental hygienists, and a whole variety of other health service professionals. An information manager is a special kind of an affiliate, usually a business or contract provider, that provides a service to the custodian about managing the information. It is usually done outside of the four walls of the clinic and is often an electronic medical records vendor or an EMR vendor, and they provide software where the patient information resides. It might also be a billing agent, a transcriptionist, or perhaps somebody who's providing a scanning service for you off-site. The information manager must follow the rules of the custodian about how the health information is protected, how it's kept confidential, and how it's kept secure. The patient has the right to access their information. There is a process, and it usually requires filling out a form, sending it to the custodian, and requesting the information to be processed. There may or may not be a fee. That's discretionary to the custodian. When you add new health service providers to your group practice, it's very important that you have a clear understanding about who has access to the records when the physician is joining the new practice and later when that physician exits the practice. So the custodian, who is the business owner, has a contractual agreement with the health service providers. It may be on a locum basis, it might be a contractual basis, they might be shareholders. But you need to have a clear understanding about who is going to have continued access to the records when they are practicing as a group and when that group disbands for any number of reasons. When you have a new health service provider joining your group, you need to make sure that there is a clear understanding about all of the things that they will have access to, the oaths of the confidentiality, and all of the forms and best practices that need to be put into place. When a health service provider leaves a practice, again, it must be very clear as to who is going to have continued access to that information. Obviously, the patient should have continued access to their information, and whether or not it comes directly from the custodian that started the practice or from the physician or the practice provider that's leaving the practice, you need to make sure it's clear and apparent to the patient that yes, they can have access to their information and this is how to do it. When a healthcare provider leaves a practice and wants to have a summary of the patient's information, that information should be provided from custodian to custodian without a charge. In an EMR world, it's often very easy to press a button, come up with a summary for that patient record. Maybe it's 2 or 3 pages, and that should be provided to the exiting healthcare provider on a case-by-case basis as requested either by the patient or by the custodian. The information manager might prepare those records, or it might be managed in the affiliates, the employees of the group practice, on a case-by-case basis. If the exiting healthcare provider wants many records, there should be a process identified at the beginning of that contractual relationship in the information manager agreement about how they're going to have access to many records. The custodian who has signed the contract with the electronic medical records vendor must authorize the release of the information. You can agree at the beginning how that release will be maintained. You could get a copy in the TOPD extract. You might get a copy printed to paper. You might get a copy that is printed to a PDF version or other electronic version of the record and provided to that exiting healthcare provider. These are details that you need to identify when you are starting your group practice and as you have additional healthcare providers joining your practice. Be very clear about who authorizes the information, what will they have access to, and who's going to pay the associated costs. You can design your information manager agreement in many different ways. The important thing is that when you are starting your business relationship, that you have a clear understanding about how you're going to exit that relationship. You might change the details when you get to that exit point as long as they're mutually agreeable. This is Jean Eaton of Information Managers. Stay tuned.